In this part, we will review Moderan reports options. And Moderan has a list of ready-made reports built into the system, as you can see here. And the first and a key report is an overview of your contract deadlines to make sure you don't miss any important dates about indexations, end of rental period, or other important dates. By default, you first see the next 2 months because this is normally what you already work on, and the overdues. So for example, if a tenant insurance has expired and they haven't sent you an update about that, it's still an issue you need to address so that you don't forget it. But yes, a task list for your next 2 months. But if you want, you can always take all the reminders as well until whatever year you have. So for example, here we have up to 2027. And then you can group them by the subject or any other issue that you need and how you deal with these topics. So this is an overview of your contract deadlines and your upcoming tasks, essentially. The next report that we have ready is tenant changes, which shows you an overview of the incoming and leaving tenants in your portfolio. So for example, here we see automatically that within the last ended month, 2 contracts finished and 1 new one started. So in total, we have a bit less of space rented out, and the total rent and average rent actually as well went down a little bit. So this is a summary of just 1 month, and here you can also see more details about the specific contracts that ended and the specific contracts that started. Now, if you want, you can of course take the same overview for any time period. So for example, let's take a look for this year. So in total for this year, we're seeing that actually only 4 contracts finished and 15 new contracts started, and much more space was rented out in the portfolio as a whole. So here again, we see more details about the specific contracts. So this gives you a quick snapshot of what's going on in your portfolio with the tenants, who's coming, who's leaving. Now, the next report that we have ready is rent and fees calculation. So the role of this report is to give you an automatic overview of all the input for invoicing the tenant for rent. So if we open up, we see, for example, here, grouped by each tenant, all the fees that they need to pay. So for example, this tenant here has 2 different contracts to pay. And then you see in detail the different types of fees and how they're charged. If they're charged by units, like parking typically is, by square meters, which is common for rent, if they have a fixed monthly fee, or any other types of setup. So this is covered here in full detail as it needs to go on the invoices. And then you can see you can send this report through Excel to the accountants, or if we have integrations, this is also fed into the accounting systems. Now you're also seeing a blue line here. This is to indicate that for some fees, you might be using a different payment interval. So for example, we're seeing that this contract here has a quarterly payment. And since it's paid on a quarterly basis, and we currently have in October, it shows that, for example, this fee is charged in October for 3 months in advance. And then in next month, like in this case above here, there will be zeros until the next upcoming payment. So it also helps you cover the different payment intervals in your portfolio. The next report is a bit of analytics about your properties and the spaces that you have. So here we have a list of spaces. Moderan itself lists the standard typical ones like retail, restaurant, office, and so on. But as you can see here as well, you can actually define your own space types as you need them. And then Moderan automatically shows you what is the share of this type of space in your portfolio. So here we see office is the dominant. And more importantly, what is the average rent per square meter for this specific type of space? So for example, of course, we know that office and retail spaces are always rented out with a higher price than, for example, warehouses. So you can immediately see it from this report. And now, if you want to take a closer look, who is actually charged what rent for which space, you have an overview of the specific contracts in each group. So for example, if you need to develop pricing for certain spaces, you can compare the other contracts in advance. Now, what's also interesting is that in this report, in Moderan in general, you can look at all the data and reports for the whole portfolio, like we're looking at right now, or you can look at just one property at once. So for example, if we take a look at this retail property, then you see immediately that retail is of course the dominant part in this property. And more importantly now, the average price per square meter is just for this property, because if your properties are located in very different areas, in city center or suburban areas, the average price might of course vary significantly. And then you can take a look again in detail which contracts are covered in here. So a bit of space-based analytics for you. Now the next report is a revenues report, which shows you an overview month to month of all the revenues that you're getting from the properties. So here, for example, we have this one property, but let's take a look at all the properties at once to have more information. And now here you see that the total is going up, fortunately. And the specific value of this report is that you can easily group the data to have a better overview of your portfolio. So for example, let's take a look that first I want to group my properties by the city, then by the tenant, and see in which city, which tenants are paying how much in total. So for example, if we scroll here a bit to Berlin, we're seeing that this tenant is in one property. Then there's another tenant in another property, and what are the total fees that they're paying. Alternatively, you can of course, instead of tenant, group it by property, and then also add the tenant filtering grouping to have more analytics. So this report helps you sort of do a lot of analysis on your total revenues. And in addition to that, we also have a graphic overview of the total revenues in each of these properties and how they compare to each other here. So this is an overview of all the revenues, and we have also a report about building performance. So basically this shows you like an aggregate snapshot of how your building is doing. So here, for example, in this office building, we're seeing what is the total leasable area for this building, how much you've already leased out. Then what is the vacancy in percentages and also in square meters, so you know how much you still need to rent out. Then you see the total monthly income from all the different fees that are then also listed behind here. And you can also see the WALTs, or how much time you have on your leases, as an aggregate average for the whole building. So you know how much secured income you basically have from this building. In addition, then we also have the spaces report. The value of the spaces report is that it shows you all the tenants and all the spaces by individual units that you're renting out. So for example, you see here that which tenants are occupying which spaces, but also how many days each of this space was vacant in the past month, because the default here is for the past month. But of course you can take for any period. So let's for example, look at this year. And then we see automatically that, for example, there's a bunch of spaces that have been occupied the whole year, and there's some that are vacant for now. And then you can nicely group this information as well. So for example, you can group by the building, and if you also want to see inside the building, so I want to see how much space I have in each floor. Then, for example, in this residential property, we have, let's see, in floor 0, we have 7 spaces. In floor 1, we have 4 spaces, and so on. And you can see the total leasable space in each of the floors as well. So these are the ready-made reports that Moderan has. In addition to the ready-made reports, Moderan rental feature also enables you to prepare reports for any other topic that you need in your portfolio. So what you just need to do here is, for example, if you need a report about a specific item, then you just select it in the columns of what you need to review. Then you adjust the columns and you then export it to Excel, and you can easily work along with the data. So Moderan is really convenient for overview and reporting to create more transparency in your portfolio.